Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
No ship should go through the Strait of Juan de Fuca. Tomorrow afternoon, evening will not be a good time.
Bracing for another big storm. A bomb cyclone is inching toward the BC coast, just as authorities tighten up winter driving rules.
Have proper tires.
Plus,
we will come up with a plan to help us get back to balanced budget.
who's in charge of what?
I suspect that I got the job because it is an important job.
The Premier unveils his cabinet with new faces and veterans in new positions.
And of course, there's a sense of excitement and a sense of loss for everybody.
And
fulfilling, yeah. To know that MJ would not grow up by himself. It's so different having a sibling to grow up with.
new research in BC gives support to people facing uterine cancer.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. Batten down the hatches. Again, a bomb cyclone is making its way toward the BC coast. Heavy wind, rain, and even snow in some areas are expected this week. As John Hernandez reports, Environment Canada has issued a special weather statement, while traffic cops are urging you to drive very carefully.
Drivers without winter tires aren't getting past this sea-to-sky traffic stop. Highway patrol officers inspecting rubber, one vehicle at a time.
We're definitely well over 1,000. We've turned approximately 5 vehicles around, as well as issued some tickets for not having the proper tires.
Winter tires have been mandatory on most BC highways for weeks, but police say enforcement is necessary right now because of the significant weather that's on the way.
Certain regions are supposed to get snow.
A bomb cyclone forming off the coast of BC is carrying an onslaught of disruptive weather, from dumps of snow at high elevations to heavy winds and rain along the coast.
The overall winds will be from the southeast, kind of circling around the cyclone, but there will also be a very strong element of outflow winds from interior of BC towards the coast.
Environment Canada warns the confluence of winds could lead to downed trees, power outages, and travel delays, while coastal waters could see big and dangerous waves. Both BC Hydro and BC Ferries say they're monitoring the storm.
Offshore, this is one of the most intense storms we've ever had.
This Washington State professor says winds could be particularly strong along the Juan de Fuca Strait.
No ship should go through the Strait of Juan de Fuca. Tomorrow afternoon, evening will not be a good time.
The Port of Vancouver says it expects vessels will brave the conditions and has been offering them safe places to anchor.
We have been reaching out to them to offer them an anchorage. And at this moment, we do have sufficient anchorage capacity to accommodate.
Challenging weather conditions on land and at sea expected to be their most severe Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. John Hernandez, CBC News, West Vancouver.
Let's bring in our weather expert, Darius Madavi, with a bit more on the timing of this bomb cyclone.
Yes, so it's going to continue moving in throughout the day today. We've seen these two lows merge, one off the Pacific, one from the Gulf of Alaska. As they merge, they're going to strengthen very quickly. So this is what's happening overnight tonight and through the day tomorrow, with that pressure expected to drop 50, maybe 60 millibars in under 24 hours. Now, the criteria to be considered a bomb cyclone is just dropping 24 millibars in under 24 hours. So this is a really exceptional storm. This is almost unheard of, really. And the winds are really going to start picking up tomorrow afternoon for the island and for other parts of the coast, and then strengthen, be at their peak probably overnight, late evening, overnight, and then taper off through the day Wednesday, but still could be very strong at times Wednesday morning. Could see some very high winds in many parts of the island as well. Now here I want to highlight, I know it gets cut off a little bit because that's where the model ends, but just look at that circulation. It almost looks like a hurricane. You wouldn't be remiss for thinking that. The pressure at the center of that storm is what you'd expect to see at the center of a Category 3 or 4 hurricane in the Atlantic. Now, the wind speeds around it are going to be like a Category 1 hurricane, kicking up waves 15 meters high. But fortunately, all that will remain out in the open ocean. Some of that maybe waves up to 8 meters high, reaching parts of the coast. But what we're really expecting to see here is those winds. We have wind warnings in place for the entire island, parts of the lower mainland as well, weather statements. It'll be a busy day, Dan.
No kidding. All right, Darius, thanks very much.
Thank you.
BC's Premier has unveiled a cabinet that includes 12 rookie MLAs and more women than men. David Eby says the 27 ministers will listen to British Columbians and deliver on health care, public safety, and affordability, among other things. The CBC's Katie DeRosa has more.
The things that concern your family around the kitchen table are going to be the issues that concern our team around the cabinet table.
Premier David Eby says those kitchen table issues include supporting British Columbians with the cost of living crisis and boosting the economy. That's why he tapped Brenda Bailey to be the new finance minister. She's in charge of a provincial balance book awash in red ink with a $9 billion deficit.
It's one of the first things I'll begin working on. We will come up with a plan to help us get back to balanced budget.
Bailey will be tasked with rolling out the cost of living rebate checks that Eby promised during the election. About 90% of British Columbians will be eligible for the rebate, which will be about $500 for individuals or $1,000 for households. Adrian Dix is out as healthcare minister, replaced by Josie Osborne. Dix will move to energy and climate solutions, a file previously held by Osborne. Dix led the province through the COVID pandemic, but in the last year, his ministry has been under scrutiny for emergency room closures and sending patients to the U.S. for expedited cancer treatment. One rural health advocate praised Osborne's appointment.
She has a strong knowledge base and awareness of rural community. We've seen a big disconnect happen between rural BC and their healthcare system, and we look forward to a new beginning with a new minister.
Mental health and addictions is no longer a standalone ministry and has been folded back into health. Eby denied that's because of public backlash to the NDP's failed decriminalization experiment, but he acknowledged
There's no question that British Columbians sent us back to Victoria to do this work with a narrow majority. I think one of the issues absolutely was the toxic drug crisis and the impact on our streets.
Former RCMP officer Gary Begg has been tapped to be Public Safety Minister and Solicitor General. Begg's win in Surrey-Guildford by 22 votes was key to securing the NDP's bare majority. Former Public Safety Minister Mike Farnworth has been moved to transportation and will also serve as House Leader. Nikki Sharma will remain the Attorney General, but gets a promotion as Deputy Premier. This cabinet features 3 of the NDP's 5 rural MLAs, as Eby tries to show his government understands the issues of British Columbians outside of urban centres.
The voices of MLAs that represent rural communities will be critically important.
Eby says that's why he created a new Ministry of State role that will focus on rural issues, led by Brittany Anderson. Unlike previous cabinet shuffles, Eby did not issue mandate letters to the ministers. Mandate letters set out the priorities for the specific ministry. Eby says he plans to release those letters in January as negotiations continue with the BC Greens to win their support on key issues. Katie DeRosa, CBC News, Victoria.
Meanwhile, the legislature has a new Speaker of the House, and it's a familiar face. The NDP's Raj Chauhan has been renominated for the role. Chauhan is the MLA for Burnaby New Westminster. He was previously elected as Speaker in 2020. For the latest on the NDP cabinet, including a full breakdown of every post, check our website, cbc.ca/BC. Health officials want you to know about a big recall of organic carrots because of a risk of E. coli. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency has issued a recall for various kinds of Bunny Love, Cal Organic, Compliments Organic, and PC Organics carrots. They were sold between August 14th and November. If you're asked to throw them out or return them to the store where you bought them. Canada's recall follows an E. coli outbreak linked to organic carrots in the U.S. The Centre for Disease Control there says one death has been reported. It's linked to Grimway Farms. Symptoms can include nausea, vomiting, and in severe cases, damaged kidneys, among other things. It is day 4 of the Canada Post strike, but the parties were back at the bargaining table, this time with a special mediator appointed by the federal government. More than 55,000 workers walked off the job last week. It has been challenging, to say the least, for some small businesses.
I would say on average maybe 30% more.
Okay.
It's quite a bit, and it's not, with local products, there's already a small margin on the product, so to eat that as a small business is just not really viable. But I'm hoping that this will also make people go out into their local neighborhood and maybe just explore their area and try to find new shops or new businesses.
More on our top story now. It is a sure sign of fall and impending winter. Leaves on the ground, but also in the gutters near sidewalks. As Pinky Wong shows us, one community is working to keep the streets and catch basins clear.
The chore of the season.
I just blow them off the side, and then we put them in the bags.
The beautiful fall colors turned volumes of mess on the streets and sidewalks.
I've had so many leaves in there that were so wet that I got a sticker on top saying, "Too heavy, we can't take it." Most annoying.
For Mike Sauer, keeping the catch basins clear in his community started during Christmas 5 years ago. He adopted multiple catch basins as holiday gifts for his family.
We thought this was just a fun way to acknowledge family during the holidays. And then when we were out cleaning them, we saw the value of making this a community initiative. But if you're a senior or you have any mobility issues at all, it really is quite hazardous. And we want to make sure everyone's safe.
Since then, the Granville Woodland Community Policing Center has adopted 60 catch basins around the neighborhood.
We named the basins after volunteers who have been successful reaching their policing goal. So RCMP, VPD, they're going to take care of us so we can take care of the basins named after them, right?
So far this year, around 2,200 cases of street flooding have been reported to the city of Vancouver.
Surface flooding on the streets as a result of kind of leaves that block our catch basins and prevent water from going into our sewer system.
The city bylaw prohibits the acts of blowing and raking leaves onto the street. City staff says they have not issued any tickets or fines for inappropriate disposal of leaves in the last couple of years. Residents are reminded that leaves should be bagged for city crews to pick up during leaf collection days. Pinky Wong, CBC News, Vancouver.
BC ski hills are also hoping for a boost in business this year after a warm, dry winter last season, and it made for a roller coaster of a run. As Saurabh Sandhu reports, the recent snowfall has boarders alike optimistic.
It's starting to look a lot like winter on BC mountains as local ski hills gear up for a busy season. For these hikers at Mount Seymour, the snowfall is a beautiful sight.
We saw that there was snowing, so we just decided to just go.
I can't wait for the resort to open. This weekend's cold and wet weather system blanketed South Coast mountains with fresh snow.
It was a pretty miserable day for Vancouver, but it was fantastic for the local ski hills.
It's a relief for ski resorts after last year's roller coaster season. And over at Cypress Mountain, more than 40 centimeters of snow fell this weekend, a stark contrast compared to last year.
Last season was a struggle as across BC and pretty much all across North America, just with the temperatures and the lack of, I'd say, winter conditions. It made it more challenging to have a season.
It was a rocky start to the season for local ski hills. The unusually warm and dry conditions forced some to close for part of the winter, leaving season pass holders and ski hill operators disappointed.
It's a positive start with what we have in November, and I hopefully more to come.
This season's looking really good. According to the weather experts, we're looking at a kind of weak La Nina. A weak La Nina means it should be kind of like a little bit wetter and a little bit more kind of colder than usual. So that's fantastic for us.
Whitehead says it's too early to say when Mount Seymour will open, but he's optimistic the resort will be welcoming skiers to their slopes by mid-December. More than 30 centimeters of snow falling over just the past couple of days, things are looking pretty white at Mount Seymour. The resort says it's a good sign that they're seeing more snow than rain for this time of the year. And with just a little more help from Mother Nature, they say, they might even be able to open a week or two early this season. Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, North Vancouver.
Vancouver was buzzing with action this Grey Cup weekend. Restaurants were packed and BC Place rather electric. The Toronto Argonauts beat the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in the championship game Sunday night, 41-24. And BC's tourism ministry estimates about 30,000 people came from out of town from the game, many from across the country.
It's pretty unique to see that, fans from each team coming across the country to watch this game.
It's the greatest sporting event in Canada. Every year it unites the country coast to coast.
Some And doctors are protesting on Vancouver Island. Their demand, better overdose prevention facilities. That story is next. Some Vancouver Island doctors are protesting against current hospital rules, setting up 2 unsanctioned drug overdose prevention sites on hospital grounds in Nanaimo and Victoria.
Concerns we know have been expressed in the media at times about unintended exposure to unregulated substances, people using the bathrooms, using their hospital rooms. No one thinks this is a good scenario, and we aim to alleviate those concerns too. This is the most ethical way to do that, is to provide a designated space.
The protesters demand better services at hospitals for people struggling with addiction. The protest comes just days before what they call the deadliest time of the month for most drug users.
Wednesday is check day this month. It's the most lethal day every month for overdoses due to the unregulated drug supply. So we're here because basically we want to be as useful as possible to this population in and around what is the deadliest time of the month for them.
The group wants the province to provide designated spaces for people to use illicit substances in hospitals. Harriet says a facility like that helps save lives, reduces drug debris in the area, and connects people with the right kind of help. Still with health, new research supported by the BC Cancer Foundation is changing the way some uterine cancer patients are treated. As Janella Hamilton reports, the innovative approach aims to spare young patients from a hysterectomy, providing hope for those who want to carry children.
You like it? Hi.
For Marley Fell Castillo, holding her baby girl in her arms is a reminder of what she's overcome. At just 28 years old, Castillo's obstetrician diagnosed her with early-stage endometrial cancer, a type of womb cancer, a disease that is less common in younger patients.
The fast fix is do a hysterectomy.
But a hysterectomy would mean Castillo would lose her ability to have more biological children.
I wanted to have another child and have MJ a sibling.
Determined to grow her family, Castillo was referred to a study funded by BC Cancer. The research is examining the efficacy of an innovative approach that combines medical treatments with a minimally invasive surgical procedure, an approach that is not widely used in Canada.
We're treating patients with a combination of hormonal and what we call anti-hormonal therapy against the cancer. And then we are combining that with surgery. So the hysteroscopy, one, monitors for disease. Two is it allows us to, in areas where the cancer or hyperplasia may be more resistant to the hormonal treatment, it allows us to resect those areas.
Researchers say the clinical trial has shown the study protocol to be safe and effective in fighting cancer while preserving fertility, a major advancement in medical care for patients across Canada.
Other centers want to collaborate with us so that they can implement the same program in their own center. So we've got interest from Ottawa, we've got interest from Saskatchewan.
After more than a year of treatments at BC Women's Hospital, Castillo's uterus no longer showed signs of cancer cells, and she was given the all clear to try for a second child.
They only give us 6 months to like a timeline because I had to be off my medication and then they had to take off the IUD, and with that, the chances of the cancer cells coming back is really high.
But that small window was all she needed to conceive now 4-month-old Madeline Jeremiah, whom she calls her miracle baby.
It's fulfilling, yeah, to know that MJ would not grow up by himself. It's so different having a sibling to grow up with.
Through the study, about 11 women in BC have been able to avoid a hysterectomy, including Castillo, who hopes the alternative approach can help more families like hers. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Delta.
A look at the day that was at Mackenzie Beach near Tofino. The day started with sunshine, but a storm is quickly approaching the west coast of Vancouver Island, and it promises some strong winds. Darius has your BC-wide weather forecast next.
Hey, I'm Rohith Joseph. Vibin' is the new show all about discovering great new songs and fresh artists from across BC and beyond. Stream Vibin' on CBC Listen.
It is the start of the second week of the COP29 Climate Summit, being held this year in Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan. All this week, we'll be looking at those talks and how British Columbians are working to combat the climate crisis here at home. Now, delegates to the conference have their work cut out for them. UN officials are calling for strong action to help developing nations deal with climate change. But as Susan Ormiston tells us, little progress was made last week.
Week 2 of the United Nations Climate Conference began with blunt words.
Let's cut the theatrics and get down to real business.
An apt critique of week 1 at COP29 echoed by others.
This has been one of the worst first week of a COP in my 15 years of attending.
The so-called finance COP is tasked with squeezing hundreds of billions of dollars out of the world's wealthiest countries to help developing nations adapt to climate change and move away from fossil fuels.
We don't have any clarity on the amount of finance that developing countries will be provided and who is going to contribute to that pot.
Part of the problem, with a new Trump administration on the way, he says U.S. leadership has been neutered.
Many of the rich world wanting to hide behind Trump's administration, so not wanting to come forward on the delivery of the much needed finance.
COP29 comes in a year of savage storms, crippling drought, and deadly floods. Yet oil and gas production is on the rise, and so are emissions. Baku's towers of flame, as they're called, are homage to its oil and gas reserves, and the host country, Azerbaijan, is under pressure.
How many oil and gas deals have Azerbaijan done this year while leading these talks?
He doesn't answer directly.
The world is moving on the direction to increase the green energy, green transition.
There's still hope that we can land a transformational deal here.
Canadian Caroline Bruyette is ready for the fight.
It is going to include long nights, but really we cannot afford to fail.
COP itself is under scrutiny after a public critique by some former UN leaders and climate experts said the annual conference can no longer deliver change fast enough and should be overhauled. So a lot is riding on this week's outcome. Susan Ormiston, CBC News in Baku, Azerbaijan.
The climate crisis is also having a huge impact on public health. The WHO says between 2030 and 2050, climate change is expected to cause around 250,000 more deaths every year from things like undernutrition, malaria, diarrhea, and heat stress. Joining us now for more on how health industries are working to combat the climate crisis is our CBC medical columnist, Dr. Melissa Lem. Dr. Lem, also president of the Canadian Association for Physicians of the Environment. Dr. Lem, good to see you. First of all, what role does health play at the COP negotiations going right now, if any, and what progress do you hope is being made?
Well, you mentioned some stats from the WHO, and the WHO also calls climate change the greatest threat to global health of the 21st century. And when you total up the healthcare costs of extreme heat and air pollution and Lyme disease, here in Canada, it's estimated we're going to be spending an additional $110 billion per year within 25 years if we don't hit our climate targets. And we know our healthcare system is already in crisis, and you have to wonder how we're going to find that extra money. So in terms of COP29, we did see an entire health day for the first time at COP28 last year, and coincidentally today is actually Health Day at COP29, and I'm hoping we see progress on a few fronts. So one is helping the 85 countries, including Canada, that have already committed to decarbonizing and preparing their health systems for climate change, effectively put those changes into place. But as we know, and as was mentioned, progress is not going to happen without funding. This COP has been called the finance COP because high-income countries like Canada are supposed to sign off on a new funding target to help low-income countries reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and prepare for what's coming. So I really hope we see the Global North hitting that $1 trillion finance goal to help clean up the mess that we've created, because this is not charity, it's actually an investment in a healthy future.
In terms of other solutions, what are you focusing on in your work at the Canadian Association for Physicians for the Environment?
Well, Dan, I've mentioned many times before on our segment that a big focus of mine is nature-based solutions for health, including prescribing nature to patients. Not only are our neighborhoods more resistant to heat and flooding when we have more green spaces and tree cover, but people who have access to nature are healthier physically and mentally too, outside of those climate events that green space protects us from. Another big focus of mine is pushing for policy that moves our energy systems away from fossil fuels like oil and gas to clean, renewable energy. And one big reason is all the air pollution that burning fossil fuels creates. There was a recent Harvard study that calculated that 1 in 5 premature deaths worldwide are due to air pollution from fossil fuels. And in Canada, our number is 1 in 7. So supporting investments in public transit, which reduces cars on the road, bike lanes, speeding up the phase out of gas-powered cars, and making sure that new homes and buildings are hooked up to renewable electricity instead of natural gas, which means cleaner and healthier air indoors and outdoors, are really important.
And lastly, we appreciate your time. Here in BC, we're seeing some of those most direct health impacts from extreme weather events, heat and flooding, the deadly heat dome. What about what's being done here in BC?
Well, we're at the point where we can't adapt our way out of climate change. We need to invest just as much, if not more, in reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. And economists for a long time have been estimating we need to spend at least 2% of our GDP on reducing our emissions. And to date, we haven't come close to that with any provincial budget. That said, the BC government just announced its new cabinet today. And it was really good to see that there's a new ministry called Energy and Climate Solutions that our former health minister, Adrian Dix, is now in charge of. And he switched places with our new health minister, Josie Osborne. So I hope we're going to see new attention being paid to this intersection of fossil fuels and their impacts on climate change and health moving forward.
Dr. Melissa Lem, we always appreciate your time and expertise. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Dan.
The Mounties have reportedly foiled an Iranian plot to assassinate Irwin Cotler. The former federal justice minister and human rights activist has been a strong critic of Tehran. Last month, officials told him he faced an imminent threat of being killed by Iranian agents. Cotler has been under protection since the Hamas attacks on Israel last year. Here's more from Olivia Stefanovich.
In calling out this moral evil,
human rights advocate Irwin Cotler is well known as an outspoken critic of the regime in Tehran.
Iran is basically a threat to international peace, a threat to the rules-based international order.
He even warned of Iran's attacks against political dissidents outside its borders on CBC News Network.
There's transnational repression, and increasingly of late we're seeing not only transnational repression engineered by Iran, but transnational assassinations.
Now, the 84-year-old says he himself was targeted. As first reported by the Globe and Mail, the former justice minister says he was informed last month of a plan by agents of Iran to kill him within 48 hours, an attempt ultimately foiled by the RCMP.
This is at a level of horrific that is unspeakable.
Horrible, scary.
This is so despicable, and it shows how serious is foreign interference in our life in Canada.
In the House of Commons, MPs condemned the death threats orchestrated by the Iranian regime.
I have the confidence in our police forces to be able to handle this, and as a person who's dealt with threats directly myself.
Cotler was not available for an interview, but told Radio-Canada he's been under 24-hour RCMP protection for well over a year, ever since the Hamas attack on Israel last year, in which the militants killed hundreds and took hundreds more hostage.
It's surprising because Irwin Cotler is a very prominent name. It's not surprising because it is consistent with past allegations concerning Iran.
This defense expert says Cotler was likely targeted by Iran to send a message to others who criticize the regime.
But for all of the Chinese Canadian, Iranian Canadian, Indian Canadian activists and human rights militants and so on who don't have the visibility of Mr. Cotler, there is a need to reach out to them to better understand their needs, to better understand the threat level.
The Globe reports the threat level faced by Cotler has been reduced. However, Cotler could not confirm that part of the report. It's also not known whether suspects have been arrested or if they fled the country. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
It's called deepfake porn, explicit images created by AI, and it's on the rise. The false images feature people who never posed for them. They're then used to extort, harass, and embarrass the victims. And as Ellen Morrow reports, it's young people who are often targeted.
This is one of countless sites, easy to find online, that uses artificial intelligence to nudify images.
We're gonna
undress. Oh, God.
The result, a fake image that I never took that looks real enough.
It just feels icky. It's not me.
If I were just posting this on social media, I mean, it would convince a lot of people.
These were the messages that I got. You know, sounds like a teenager.
16-year-old Ruby in Toronto was targeted in a deepfake phishing scam. She received these messages telling her there were photos of her online, trying to get her to click on a link. But when she refused, Ruby was sent an explicit deepfake. A once fully clothed photo she had posted on social media now showed her topless.
Someone who I do not know has this picture of me where I really do look naked. And whether or not that's true, that's a really disturbing image that someone has.
There's one main tip line for all of Canada to report sexually explicit deep-faked images of young people, and it's here at the Canadian Centre for Child Protection in Winnipeg. They said last year they processed 4,000 of those images, and it was their very first year tracking them.
Because of the availability of these tools that are often even advertised or made available for free, this has continued to grow and evolve and continue to be a problem.
The government's online harms bill targets tech companies to force them to do more to remove sexually explicit deepfakes, but the bill is tied up in a precarious parliament. All the while, the technology is rapidly improving. Brandon Lohr is an online safety educator delivering workshops to schools across Canada.
A hacker gets
that education more in demand as schools start to see deepfake porn cases of their own.
You really can't control what other people post about you. Once you press that post button, you do lose some control.
As far as Ruby knows, the deepfake of her was never posted publicly. The family's goal now, raising awareness.
What's still being taught around cybersecurity is that nothing ever leaves the internet, and to be safe, don't take nude photos. And that's true, but now it's an entirely other ballgame.
Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Toronto.
A serious policy change as Russia accusing the U.S. of escalating the war in Ukraine. President Biden authorizing Ukraine to strike Russia with long-range missiles. More on the war after this. Darius Madavi joins us with our BC-wide weather forecast. Before we get to the bomb, we had some booms across parts of the South Coast last night.
Very nice, Dan. Yes, thunder in a few places across Metro Vancouver last night, which you can see here. Here we go. We're going to skip to just last night. You can see some of that thunder rolling through. Now, you may have noticed this was not really forecasted. What happened was there was some cooler air aloft that was actually colder than was expected, and that relatively warm air wanted to get up, likes to rise. That gave us the instability that we needed to generate some thunderstorms very quickly. They came on quite suddenly. So if you're wondering why that, you may not have heard about that in your weather forecast. I'll just say I'm glad I wasn't working because I probably wouldn't have called for it either. So that's good. Now, looking ahead, though, lots of weather warnings in place up and down the coast. Here in Metro Vancouver, just a special weather statement, though, as well as in inland sections of parts of the coast, because it's really expected to be a coastal story as we head in. So lots of them, the entirety of Vancouver Island, because pretty much everywhere we are expecting to see some pretty intense winds. You can see that here, actually. I've put in a couple pauses just to highlight. There we go, over 100 kilometers per hour, that gust for Ucluelet. There we go, Tassis as well. If we roll this forward some more, you can see even on the east coast of the island getting up pretty high. There we go, 83 in Ucluelet as well. Victoria at times also getting up to, I missed it, but there was a 90 down there for Victoria. Again, very high winds in many of these places. If we zoom out to the rest of the BC, I also wanted to highlight the fact, I put that wave transition as a reminder, the waves off the coast are going to be very high, up to 10, 15 meters. Fortunately, not going to see that on shore. Parts of the west coast of the island could see waves up to 6 to 8 meters, though, maybe as high as 10 meters. And I also wanted to highlight, just take a look. It almost looks like the eye of a hurricane there. That's how intense that storm is going to be. It has that center that's just not seeing those winds. In terms of In terms of precipitation, also seeing that roll in. We're going to see that move into the coast with this next system rolling in. Lots of snow at those higher elevations. Then as we get into Thursday night, another system coming up from the south this time. So rainfall totals not expected to be too high on the mainland, but parts of the island may see some fairly high totals. Conditions across the province tomorrow look fairly calm until we get into that overnight period when that system arrives on the island and then makes its way inland. So lots of snow on the mountains. And here we go, Dan. Lots of rain in the forecast.
Consistent. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
Russia is warning there will be consequences if Ukraine uses long-range missiles to attack Russian territory. The Americans appears to have shifted its policy, allowing Ukraine to hit targets deeper inside Russia with U.S.-made missiles. Briar Stewart reports.
In the southern Ukrainian city of Odessa, rescue crews picked through the aftermath of a missile strike that killed at least 10. More still narrowly survived. I do not feel hatred anymore. What I feel is disgust, said this man whose apartment was destroyed in the attack. After being pummeled for 1,000 days, Ukraine now reportedly has the ability to hit back further into Russia with the U.S.-made Army tactical missile systems known as ATACMS. The weapons have a maximum range of 300 kilometers, meaning they could target more than a dozen airfields over the border. Ukraine has been pleading for permission to fire them deeper into Russia for more than a year, but the U.S. only granted it now. It's thought the decision came because of the thousands of North Korean troops who are said to be stationed in Russia's Kursk region, which is where this Ukrainian soldier was based. We've agreed not to identify him because of security concerns.
The situation is not easy, and we have big forces.
He says the U.S. permission is better late than never.
I cannot tell you what we will see about 1 month, few months, because it's war and winter is coming.
On the streets of Moscow, calls for vengeance and calm. I hope that we will be smart and our government will communicate and negotiate, says this woman. Of course we should strike back, says this man. Russian officials have accused the U.S. of recklessness.
It means the involvement of NATO, and the involvement of NATO might mean a serious conflict that will be a danger for the whole world.
But it's Ukraine that remains under attack. The country's president visited the frontline city of Pokrovsk, where troops are trying to hold back a Russian advance that continues to claw away at the southeast. It's not clear how many ATACMS Ukraine has, but there is more uncertainty. The decision was made by the outgoing Biden administration, and it could change when Donald Trump and his team takes power in 2 months. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
As the war between Israel and Hamas grinds on, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza deepens. To make matters worse, gunmen have looted trucks carrying food supplies into the enclave. It's not clear who those armed men are, though Israel has attributed such attacks to militants and criminal gangs. More now from Chris Brown.
Outside the only operating bakery in Gaza's Khan Yunis, a city jammed with up to 1 million mouths to feed, a mob of hungry people wait up to 8 hours each day for the chance to get pita bread. Sharouk Abu Ammar said she arrived at 2 a.m. My daughter sleeps hungry. Shame on them, the Israelis, she says. Today I came for nothing, said Hala Awad. There's no flour. The whole market is basically sand. Over the weekend, others in the city chanted, "No to death. We want flour," demanding Israel let in more trucks with food. The Israeli agency responsible for delivering food says there is no hunger crisis in Gaza. Kogat says there are hundreds of truckloads worth of aid waiting to be collected in Gaza, including 137 that came through Monday.
Our assessment is that there is enough food coming into the Gaza Strip. But if there is an organization that would like to increase the amount of food, all they need to do is coordinate that together with us.
The discrepancy between Israel's assertions and the scenes of distress is hard to reconcile. But aid groups say once inside Gaza, a lot of food doesn't get delivered because of terrible logistics and theft. Over the weekend, 97 trucks were reportedly looted, but it's not clear by whom.
There is not enough food reaching people in Gaza.
Aid worker Rachel Cummings, who's in central Gaza, says it's Israel's legal responsibility to protect the trucks.
We're deeply concerned about the proportion of children that we're seeing reaching the health centres with signs of being malnourished, both moderate and severe.
Israel says it's working with aid groups to improve deliveries. But at the local hospital, the pediatric ward is full of badly undernourished children. He's very skinny, said Yusuf Abu Laman of her 10-year-old son. She says he needs fruit, vegetables, and especially clean drinking water, but it's impossibly expensive to buy. I'm telling you, she says, we're in a famine. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
The Duke of Sussex is drumming up support for next year's Invictus Games, spending the day with some students here in BC. That story is next. You're going to be able to watch more hockey in town come the new year. The takeover tour of the Professional Women's Hockey League is making stop at Rogers Arena on January 8th. That's when the Montreal Victoire and Toronto Scepters will go head-to-head.
Fans can watch some of the top women's hockey players in the world in the 6-team league, like Canada's very own Marie-Philippe Poulin and Sarah Nurse. Tickets go on sale at the end of this week. And there's a new push to keep girls playing organized sports.
A new report says many girls still believe sports are more for boys and that more can be done to ensure girls get the benefits of participation. Jamie Strachan explains.
Remember to spread out, don't be so tight.
As the weather cools, the game is moved inside for this girls' soccer team. For Bridget Byrne, it's one of many sports she enjoys.
It's really fun to play sports because you can have good teammates and you can play and make new friends.
Her coach agrees.
I always want to create a safe environment where they can come out, try new things. I want to be that role model in their life like I had when I was growing up.
A new report says 63% of girls 6 to 18 participate in organized sports, higher than ever, and only slightly behind boys. And fewer are leaving sport as they get older.
For the first time, we're seeing that the dropout rate between girls and boys is actually starting to close and look more comparable, which is a real positive sign, sign of progress.
Participation begins to fall as girls get older, quitting because of a number of factors, including many girls thinking that sports are for boys. But that's changing.
They want to be who they are, and they see that now on TV.
Olympian Marnie McBean says a new professional sports landscape is giving young girls something to shoot for.
You watch the PWHL, it's a physical sport. It's amazing. It doesn't have to be dumbed down to be girls' sport.
Take the shot, save this, score!
So the future, I think, is really exciting.
I have days where I'm like super happy and my teammate might be struggling.
Canadian basketball star Kia Nurse says it's important for young girls to know they can be feminine and sporty.
We tend to not put ourselves in boxes and say you can only look one certain way. We try to give ourselves an opportunity to show that you can be your most authentic self, because that's when you're going to play your best.
Young athletes are increasingly cutting through the noise and enjoying the game.
Just like, you know what, I don't even care no more. It's my business. Well, how about you do your thing and I do my thing?
It's what more and more young girls across the country are saying. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Toronto.
Prince Harry met today with school children in Vancouver, promoting the 10th edition of the Invictus Games.
He's building support for the coming games, which will be hosted by Vancouver and Whistler in February. CBC's Lindsay Duncombe has more.
You know, this is a prince who has the gift of the gab, especially when it comes to talking to children, because we're in a military event. It's the Armory here. There is a whole schedule. This is going to happen 5 minutes later, and we were a bit behind. And I was told the reason we were a bit behind is because Prince Harry just couldn't stop talking with those kids. He was genuinely interested in what they were doing. And what they were doing is learning about the sentiments behind the Invictus Games, which of course is for injured veterans. And for younger kids, they were coloring pictures, identifying the I am, what they are in terms of being resilient or creative. There was a game of seated volleyball for middle school students, and then high school students were studying the meaning of a poem related to the Invictus Games. Here's what Prince Harry said the event was like.
Meeting the kids today, who most of them should have been in gym class, seemed pretty happy to be here instead, apart from the ones that really, really love gym. But seeing them learn about the Invictus Games has had a profound impact on me, because this is where Invictus starts to go even wider, outside of the Invictus community, into schools in Canada and hopefully around the world as well.
Now, these specific lessons were designed ahead of the Invictus Games happening here. They will be available on the website for schools all over the world to use if they want.
Lindsay Duncombe reporting.
Those games are going to be fun.
Yeah,
yeah,
should be
next
good.
year.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
And we will have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. So, see you then. Good night.